Michigan historically has measured its progress by how well it does relative to its past. But that really isn't what the true measure should be. It really is about how are we doing relative to the people that we're competing with. Our benchmarking process grounds what we do in facts. It takes the anecdotes and the "I think" out of the equation and really gets it down to what is it that we are doing versus other places that we need to change. We look at about 40 or 50 different sets of metrics. Some of them are things like our population and our incomes and our earnings to see how well we're doing against actually our objectives of creating good jobs. But the other are indicators of things that might lead to creating more good jobs, like, for example, the education level of our workforce or the ability for us to get more new businesses started up. The more competitive we are as a state, the more likely it is that businesses are going to want to grow here and businesses are going to want to come here. Because in today's global economy, business is going to go where they can get the best value for the best cost, and locations that can offer that kind of combination are going to be the winners in tomorrow's marketplace. You have to work on multiple fronts basically to really get to be top 10, and we think our benchmarking study provides a good fact base to do that.
Please welcome back to the stage Doug Rothwell, President and CEO, Business Leaders from Michigan.
So, first of all, I want to thank Jeff for getting us off to a great start here this morning, and I just think his remarks were absolutely spot on for what I'm going to speak with you about next, because the real issue is, thanks Sabrina, the real issue is change is accelerating. And places, just like companies, can't stand still. And as I said in the introductory remarks, I mean, the real issue I see, having been in Michigan now for a couple of decades, is we've typically measured our progress by how we did in the past, Michigan did, as opposed to really looking at how we compare to our competitors that we're really trying to get more business from and more people from year after year. And in today's world, just like only the winning companies are really going to thrive, the same thing is true for places as well. So I'm going to walk you through some data to kind of illustrate this point. Let's take a look at where Michigan stands. The good news is, after years of decline, Michigan's getting back in the game again, to the middle pack of the state competitors, if you will. And that's not a small feat, because if you look back just a few years ago, I mean, we were dead last among the states. But running in the middle of the pack is really not going to get us the jobs, the incomes, the healthy economy that we say that we want. To get those, we're going to need to run a heck of a lot faster, and we're going to actually need to catch up with those top 10 states. Why top 10? Why do we keep talking about this? Well, it's because here's what Michigan would actually look like if we were a top 10 state. We'd have 150,000 more jobs, we'd earn $12,000 more per person, and we produce $16,000 more per person. So again, let me test your skills here a little bit. Can you remember the last time Michigan actually was a top 10 state? Get out your phones and let's find out how competitive this audience is. So use your voting devices and cast your vote for when you think Michigan was last a top 10 state. Is the answer that nobody thinks we were ever a top 10 state? Okay, so you get a sense of what you think. Here's the real answer. We were a top 10 state in every single one of those periods, as recently as the 1990s. The point is, we've been a top 10 state and we can do it again. So we know from looking at the data that we actually are getting closer to top 10 today than we used to be by looking at certain output metrics. Output metrics are kind of like vital health statistics. Think of them as like your temperature, your blood pressure, your pulse, things like that. When the output indicators are weak, there's symptoms that something's going wrong beneath the surface. And when they're strong, we know we're doing something right. So the output metrics that we use to define whether Michigan has a healthy economy focus on employment, incomes, GDP, and population. Now this chart shows whether we were getting better, worse, or staying the same back in 2009 versus 2013, and whether we were a top 10 state in those years as well. So if you take a look at where we were back in 2009, only one measure did we hit top 10, and in all of them we were actually getting worse. Now that's pretty close to flatlining, to use this health analogy that we're using to try to explain this. Look at 2013. On half the measures we're actually top 10, and on most we're getting better. That tells us that a lot of the things that we did between 2009 and 2013 were the right things to do. Here are some of the numbers that illustrate that. So on each of these slides, what I'm going to do is share with you, first of all, where do we actually rank today? That's the big number that's up there. Our actual achievement level, that's the small number at the top of next to the big number. Whether we're improving, staying the same, or getting worse, that's the arrow. And the actual achievement level of the top 10 states, that's the bottom number. And then next to those in the chart, you can see how Michigan's performing, that's blue. The pure states, that's aqua, and then the top 10 states are in orange. Now this slide is based on a little dated information because it's back in 2013, because the numbers we could get that were comparable, but the point is the same. On job creation, you see a trend that's moving in the right direction. That's the arrow in the chart for Michigan, but our ranking is still a long way from being top 10, the big number. On this and the next few charts, actually let me go back for a second here. So that's the number on unemployment. On per capita personal income, on this and the next few charts, we included rankings for both our absolute ranking as well as the growth rate at the bottom. Now the bottom ranking shows we were 9th for growing incomes, but the top ranking indicates that we're still a long way from being top 10, 35th. And the chart on the right illustrates the gap between us and our peer and top 10 states. I spoke of earlier, for example, this $12,000 gap between us, what we're earning today, and what top 10 states people are earning. And you can see that difference between the blue line and the orange line on the chart. Now, Michigan's GDP growth, seen on the bottom chart, has been rising, but our overall ranking, again on the top chart, still falls below average. Again, it's kind of like personal income. The gap between us and a top 10 state is about $16,000 per person if you look at the chart on the right. And then finally on population, the story is different, but it's still cautionary. We're a top 10 state for the size of our population, and we are growing again after a decade of out-migration. But our growth in population is 10 times lower than the average of top 10 states. And we're likely to drop from being the 9th to the 10th most populous state this coming year. And that's important because business is attracted to where growth is. So if we want Michigan to be economically healthier, how do we get there? Well, if you were a person again, if Michigan was a person, you'd look at your lab results, your lifestyle factors, your family history, to understand what might be contributing to the overall health of you as an individual. These are input metrics. And like your personal health, if a state's input metrics improve, then we think the outputs are going to be better as well. So let's look at this for a little bit more detail. The input metrics that we pay attention to are factors that are used by business and site consultants about where they consider to locate or expand a business. We also look at leading indicators because we think those correlate with strong economic performance. Overall, what we find is that the best performing locations have something in common with the best performing businesses. They offer more value for what they charge than their competitors. So this means you don't have to be the lowest cost product or place to thrive and be the best performer, but you do have to offer more value to your customer for what you're charging. So let's take a look at a few of these measures of what it costs to do business in Michigan. This chart provides an overview of several metrics, and it shows again where we were in 2009 versus 2013. And overall, this chart looks like the others that I've been showing you. things were bad and getting worse back in 2009. Things are better and are mostly improving in 2013. Let's take a look at, for example, two of these cost metrics in a little greater detail. Our corporate tax climate went from bottom 10 to top 10 in the past few years based on eliminating the Michigan business tax. Now the trend is down, as you see in the chart, but that's because a few other states made major changes to their corporate taxes in the last year. The reason is because they're actually now trying to copy some of what we did, which is really refreshing to see. Let's look at the overall business tax climate. That's improved as well. Our ranking puts us ahead of both our peers in aqua as well as the top 10 states in orange on the chart. And I suspect this is going to look even better in future years as the personal property tax gets phased out. So the point is we can measure and actually show real progress in how our business climate is getting more competitive. So now let's look at the value side of the cost-value equation when it comes to Michigan. This chart provides an overview, again, of some of the most important value factors, and the performance that you'll notice is not as strong as the factors were on cost that I showed you just a few minutes ago. Let's take a look at these in some more detail. To me, this one's the most troubling of all. Only 21% of our 11th graders are deemed to be ready to go to college or a job when they graduate from high school. That ranks us 37th among the 50 states, or 1/3 less than the top 10 states. And by the way, as you can see, we're not getting any better. We're not gaining traction. Look at this next slide. We rank dead average for the percentage of our workforce that has a technical education. Now, this is in a state that prides itself on being a manufacturing state, prides itself on a place that can take ideas and put them into practice. Well, clearly, we need more workers with technical skills if we're going to really be able to make that boast. Let's look at the next slide on education attainment. It shows that we're below average in the percentage of our workforce with an associate's degree or higher. And while we're getting better, we still fall far short of the peers in top 10 states. So the point of this is we need both more skilled and educated workers if we're going to create more good-paying jobs. That means we need more tradespeople, we need more certificate holders, we need more degree holders. And no great surprise, the roads are bad, and the numbers show it. So, many of you are familiar with the Michigan Turnaround Plan. It's a plan we designed based on data like this, a way to get to being a top 10 state, and specifically it just outlines how we can make our business climate more competitive, how we can prioritize investments and grow faster than our competitors. Now, the data shows, as I said earlier, we've made a lot of progress on making Michigan more competitive. I mean, our costs are, relatively speaking, lower than they used to be. The regulatory environment's better. But getting more competitive, it's absolutely necessary, but it can only move you to becoming an average performer. It's true for your organization, it's true for your business, it's true for a state. That's what competitiveness means. You're in the pack, but you're average by definition. And that is not good enough to win. The data shows, as I showed you up here, we need to make more progress on the second step of what our turnaround plan calls for, which is prioritizing investments. You saw how Michigan ranks no higher than average in both the skill and education level of our workforce. So how can we possibly create more good-paying jobs if we don't have the workers to fill those jobs? This means we're going to need to boost efforts to both train more workers and make college more affordable. We need more people that are both well-educated and highly skilled, and that's going to raise incomes. You also saw how Michigan ranks in the quality of our roads. But we need a solution, and yes, that means higher taxes, big enough not just to fix the potholes, but actually expand our roads and our transit systems to grow. We don't want to be a state of 10 million people. We want to be a state of 12 or 14 million people. We want to grow, not just get by. And the solution needs to be sustainable. We can't have this talk about relying on general fund money every year to fix the roads. That's just not in the works. The last step is leveraging what we're good at and growing faster than our competitors. This slide shows kind of a half dozen assets that we have in our state that the world needs more of. And our challenge is to focus more of our time, our resources, our energy to help in these grow even faster. So I kind of wrap up by saying, the one thing that we've learned from our benchmarking work is that the best performing economies focus on offering more value for cost than their competitors do. And they've stayed focused on that type of strategy for years, not just a few months. They've stuck with the program. Michigan has not had a history of thinking this way and following a strategy based on it and sticking with it year after year. But if we want to be a top 10 state, we think that's what it's going to take to close the gap to being top 10. So we've accomplished a lot. We're certainly no longer a laggard. We're at least an average performing state, which is a lot better than where we were. I encourage you to read the full benchmarking report that's in your handouts today and actually go online. It's interactive on our website at businessleadersformichigan.com. And the optimistic message is we, the business leaders of this state, really do believe that if we act on what the data tells us, we can build on what we're good at, correct what we're not, and really be that top 10 state that we all want it to be in the future. Thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your day.